Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are delighted to share with you different stories about love and betrayal from around the world. Now let's begin today's journey of stories. James returned home from his company and heard laughter coming from the kitchen as he opened the door. He paused, gently putting down his briefcase. It was his wife Charlotte's voice, along with a strange man's voice. They sounded very intimate. "Are you sure he won't come home early today?" the man asked. "Don't worry, he always works late. Even if he does come back, he won't say anything. He's too much of a gentleman," Charlotte replied with a laugh, her tone full of contempt. James took a deep breath and walked toward the kitchen. When he appeared at the doorway, Charlotte and a tall, blonde man were cuddling together, each holding a glass of red wine. The room was filled with the rich scent of perfume and the aroma of dinner. When Charlotte saw James, the smile on her face froze, but she quickly regained her composure. She put down her wine glass and said in a condescending tone, "You're home early. I wanted to surprise you," James said calmly. "Looks like the surprise was for me." The blonde man, whom James later learned was named Marcus, coughed awkwardly, but showed no intention of leaving. Instead, he looked arrogantly at James, as if assessing whether this shorter, somewhat thinner man posed any threat. "Hello, I'm Marcus." He extended his hand with a slightly challenging tone, "Charlotte's friend." James didn't shake his hand. Charlotte suddenly burst into laughter. "Stop pretending, James. What's the point? We both know this marriage has been over for a long time." She walked over to Marcus and affectionately took his arm. "Marcus and I have been together for 6 months. Now I want him to move in with me." James felt dizzy. 6 months. 18 years of marriage. 6 months of betrayal. He tried to stay calm. "We need to talk, Charlotte." "Alone?" "There's nothing to talk about," Charlotte interrupted, her eyes turning cold. "I've had enough of your face that never expresses emotion, enough of the days you're always immersed in work and ignore me. At least Marcus knows how to make a woman feel valued." James looked at Marcus, who was smiling smugly. "Don't you think you should resolve your marital issues before making such decisions?" "Oh, now you care about our marriage?" Charlotte said mockingly. "When in these 18 years have you ever truly cared about how I feel? You think I don't know what you've been doing all day in that office?" James shook his head. "I've never been unfaithful to you, Charlotte." "That's not the point." Charlotte raised her voice. "The point is that you've never really been present in this marriage. You're always absent-minded, always have more important things to handle. I need a real partner, not a shadow." Marcus placed his hand on Charlotte's shoulder, a gesture that appeared possessive and intimate. "Man, don't make this ugly. She's made her choice." James looked at the supposed couple, trying to understand how things had developed to this point. He and Charlotte had once been one of the most envied couples in Chicago. He had founded a digital security company specializing in services for high-profile clients. Charlotte was a talented marketing expert who had given him unconditional support during his early entrepreneurial days. Their life was comfortable and stable, but never extravagant. James had always thought their restraint in material pleasures was a shared value. Now, watching Charlotte lean on Marcus, James realized how superficially he had understood his marriage. "I need time to think," James finally said. Charlotte laughed again. "Think about what? You're always like this. Always thinking, always analyzing, but never acting." She walked to the dining table and poured more wine for Marcus. "Listen, I've made up my mind. Marcus is moving in, and you need to leave. This is our shared house," James calmly pointed out. "So what?" Charlotte shrugged. "No need for a divorce agreement. Just get out. I know you, James. You hate conflict, hate scandals. You'll quietly leave, just like how you've always handled all problems." Marcus laughed and put his arm around Charlotte's waist. "You heard her, man. Pack up." James looked at them silently for a moment, then turned and walked toward the bedroom. He heard Charlotte say to Marcus, "See, I told you he'd be like this. Never any resistance, always the pacifist." In the bedroom, James quickly packed his essential items. He opened the safe, taking out his passport, some cash, and several important documents. He glanced at the photo on the nightstand, taken during their honeymoon in Greece. He left it there. In fact, this wasn't the first time James had noticed problems in the marriage. Over the past few months, Charlotte's behavior had become increasingly strange, often going out until late at night, showing unusual interest in his work schedule, and changing her phone password. James had initially thought these were common manifestations of a midlife crisis, until last week when his company's security system detected someone trying to remotely access his work files. Initial investigation showed that the intrusion attempt came from the Wi-Fi network at his home while he was at the office. Instead of directly confronting Charlotte, James chose to investigate quietly. He set up security cameras in the house and tracked Charlotte's phone location. He discovered she frequently visited a high-end hotel, always with the same man. Today, he decided to come home early because through the small camera installed in the kitchen, he had already seen Charlotte bringing that man home. 20 minutes later, he returned to the kitchen. Charlotte and Marcus had sat down to enjoy dinner, with exquisite food and expensive red wine in front of them. "I'm packed," James said. Charlotte looked somewhat surprised, as if she hadn't expected him to be ready to leave so quickly. "Leave the keys," she commanded. James placed the keys on the dining table. "I'll contact a lawyer tomorrow to handle the divorce." "We don't need a divorce agreement," Charlotte said again, raising her wine glass and smiling at Marcus. "We have no children. Each has our own career. Isn't it better to end this simply?" James took one last look around what was once his home, then picked up his luggage and walked toward the door. "Don't expect to take any joint property," Charlotte called after him. "I've been waiting for this day for a long time." James didn't look back, just closed the door behind him. As he sat in his car, his phone vibrated. It was a text from his assistant Sarah. "Everything is ready. Announcement at 9 tomorrow morning." James replied with a simple confirmed, then started the car. He had booked a suite at a high-end hotel, which he had arranged several days ago. He wasn't unprepared for the possible end of his marriage. After entering the hotel suite, James stood by the window, overlooking the night view of Chicago. 18 years of marriage ended just like that. He had thought he would feel more pain, but strangely, what he mainly felt was relief, as if a heavy stone that had been pressing on his chest for a long time had finally been removed. For the past 6 months, he had been investigating a major financial fraud case involving executives from several well-known media companies and some political figures. As a digital security expert, he had collected substantial evidence proving how these people systematically misled investors and the public. This investigation had taken up much of his time and energy, and because it involved significant public interest and potential legal risks, he had to maintain absolute confidentiality. However, James knew that his neglect in the marriage didn't just begin with this investigation. Over the years, he had immersed himself in work, assuming Charlotte understood and supported his career. He neglected her emotional needs, neglected her desire to be noticed and valued. But regardless, betrayal is betrayal. He could accept responsibility for the failure of the marriage, but couldn't forgive infidelity and deception. James took out his phone and called his lawyer, Michael. "She made me leave the house," James said briefly. "With another man?" Michael asked. "Yes." "Do you have evidence?" James opened his laptop and pulled up the footage from the home security cameras. "More than you can imagine." "This works in our favor," Michael said. "Considering tomorrow's news, the timing is interesting." "She doesn't know the specifics of the investigation," James said. "She never cared about what exactly I was doing, as long as it brought in enough income for her to maintain the lifestyle she wanted. But she has shown unusual interest in my work recently, and now I know why." "Then she's in for a surprise tomorrow." Michael's tone carried a hint of cold humor. "Do you want me to start preparing the divorce papers tonight?" "Yes," James said firmly. "I want to ensure this separation is clean and swift." After hanging up, James checked the materials for tomorrow's press conference once more. The 6-month investigation had cost him countless nights and weekends, collecting evidence, analyzing data, coordinating with law enforcement. Even in the moment of his personal life collapsing, he still had a responsibility to ensure this work was flawless. The next morning, James put on his best suit and headed to his company's headquarters. The conference room was packed with reporters and industry representatives. When James took the podium, flashbulbs flickered constantly. "Ladies and gentlemen," James began, his voice firm and powerful. "Today, on behalf of Truth Security Group, I announce that we have completed our investigation into the unethical and illegal practices of Global Media Alliance." He succinctly outlined the investigation findings: systematic fraud, market manipulation, and the buying and selling of political influence. Then he presented the evidence: emails, recordings, and documents, all irrefutable. These findings have been submitted to the FBI and the Securities and Exchange Commission, James announced. Starting today, the individuals involved will face criminal charges. When he finished speaking, the room was silent, followed by a burst of questions. James calmly answered each one, demonstrating his authority and expertise as an industry leader. After the press conference, James's story immediately became headline news. Digital security tycoon exposes media giant corruption. James drops a bomb that will change the industry. Wall Street shaken by James's revelations. These headlines scrolled across all major news websites and television channels. However, what shocked Charlotte most wasn't just these headlines. Marcus was a senior reporter for Global Media Alliance and one of the main participants named. For the past 6 months, he had been trying to obtain information about James's investigation through Charlotte, and Charlotte had unwittingly revealed enough details. Charlotte sat on the couch at home, staring in disbelief at the news on TV. Her phone kept receiving messages from friends and colleagues, all asking if she knew about this. Worse, some messages suggested she might have been Marcus's route to obtaining information. When Marcus burst through the door, his face was terribly pale. "Did you know about this?" he demanded, pointing at the TV. "Your husband has been investigating my company." Charlotte shook her head, still in shock. "I didn't know. He never discusses the details of his work." "Nonsense," Marcus roared. "You must have known something. You told me he was working on a big project, possibly involving the media industry." "Yes, but I didn't know exactly what it was," Charlotte defended. "He's always very secretive." Marcus paced frantically around the room. "This isn't just a project, Charlotte. It's a damn investigation. My name is in that report. I could go to jail." Charlotte felt dizzy. 6 months ago, when she met Marcus at an industry gathering, she was attracted by his charm and attention to her. James was always too busy, too silent, while Marcus made her feel appreciated and desired. She never thought it might be a trap, a plan to use her to get close to James. "Did you approach me just to get information about James?" she suddenly realized, her voice trembling with anger. Marcus stopped pacing, his expression complex. "Initially, yes," he admitted, but then things became different. Charlotte wasn't sure whether to believe him. "So you used me, and now you want me to believe you fell in love with me?" Marcus looked both angry and hurt. "Don't portray yourself as a victim, Charlotte. You were happy to sleep with me, happy to complain about your husband, happy to share his work contents and pillow talk." Charlotte's phone rang again. It was her lawyer, Laura. "Charlotte, you need to contact me immediately. Regarding the news about James and your marital situation, things have become very complicated." Just then, the doorbell rang. Charlotte and Marcus both froze. Charlotte walked to the door and looked through the peephole to see 2 men in suits holding credentials. It was people from the bureau. Charlotte tremblingly opened the door. "Mrs. Charlotte," one of the agents asked, "we'd like to talk to you about your husband's investigation and the information you may have leaked to Mr. Marcus." Charlotte turned around to see Marcus slipping out the back door. "Marcus," she called out, but he was already gone. The phone rang again. This time it was Sarah, James's assistant. "Mrs. Charlotte, Mr. James has asked me to inform you that his lawyer will contact you in an hour to discuss divorce matters. Given your infidelity and possible leak of insider information, he will seek full control of joint property." Charlotte stood there, with the bureau people waiting nearby, the television cycling footage of her husband's press conference, and the cold, official voice coming through the phone. Only then did she realize who James truly was. Not the work-obsessed man who always remained calm whom she had despised, but a principled, planned, and capable person, someone she had never truly understood. And now, it was too late. Marcus was hiding in a shabby motel, his fingers trembling as he refreshed news websites. Each headline deepened his fear. As a senior reporter for Global Media Alliance, he had not only participated in the company's fraudulent activities, but also used his position to help cover them up. Initially, he had approached Charlotte merely out of curiosity. At an industry gathering, he happened to overhear someone mention that James's company was conducting a mysterious investigation that might affect the media industry. When he discovered that the elegantly dressed but seemingly bored woman was James's wife, he thought it would be a good opportunity to obtain information. What he hadn't expected was how hungry Charlotte was for attention and flattery. At first, he just balanced between flirting and questioning, trying to guide her to talk about her husband's work. But as time went on, he found himself genuinely attracted to her. Her intelligence, her passion, even her vulnerability, all fascinated him. For 6 months, he struggled between his professional mission and personal feelings. He told himself he could both protect the company's interests and maintain a genuine relationship with Charlotte. But now, looking at the evidence James had revealed in the news, he knew he had made a fatal mistake. Marcus's phone rang. It was his editor, Richard. "What the hell did you do, Marcus?" Richard was almost screaming. "The Bureau is in our office. They have evidence showing you not only participated in fraud, but also tried to obtain inside information through James's wife." "I can explain." Marcus tried to defend himself, but he knew how hollow it sounded. "Explain?" "The entire company is finished. Our stock has plummeted 60%. Board members are being arrested. And you actually had the nerve to use that poor woman." "She's not a victim," Marcus retorted. "She knew what she was doing. She wanted excitement, wanted attention." "Shut up," Richard interrupted. "You're fired. The company's lawyers won't provide any legal support for you. You're on your own." The call ended. Marcus threw his phone onto the bed, feeling sick. He opened the cheap whiskey provided by the motel and took a large swig directly from the bottle. Marcus knew he needed to leave Chicago as soon as possible. He had a contact in Mexico who might help arrange a temporary hideout until things blew over. But he needed money, new identity documents, a plan. The irony was that the first person he thought of in this crisis was Charlotte. Not because she might provide help, but because he had genuinely started to care for her. He picked up his phone, hesitating whether he should message her, but ultimately gave up. He had already caused her enough trouble. Meanwhile, Charlotte was sitting in an interrogation room at the Bureau. For the past few hours, she had been answering the same questions over and over. Did she know what her husband was investigating? Did she intentionally leak information to Marcus? When did her relationship with Marcus begin? "I didn't know those details," Charlotte repeated, her voice hoarse from fatigue. "James never talked to me about his work." "Then why was Marcus so interested in your husband's project?" a female agent asked, her tone calm but skeptical. Charlotte closed her eyes. How to explain how she was attracted by Marcus's attention? How to admit how much she enjoyed talking about James's work, despite knowing little about the details, just to seem important? "Marcus made me feel special," she finally admitted. "James was always busy, rarely had time for me. When Marcus asked about James's work, I may have exaggerated what I knew." "So you admit you leaked information to Marcus?" "Not intentionally," Charlotte protested. "I just mentioned James was working on a big project involving media companies. I didn't know the specifics." The agents exchanged a look. "Mrs. Charlotte, we have evidence that Marcus used the information you provided to warn his colleagues. This could constitute obstruction of justice." Charlotte felt the room spinning. "That's not possible. I didn't know." "We recommend you hire a lawyer," the agent said. "You're free to go, but don't leave the city. We'll have more questions." Charlotte stumbled out of the Bureau's building to find herself the focus of media attention. Reporters swarmed, pushing microphones and cameras in her face. "Mrs. Charlotte, did you know about your husband's investigation? Was your relationship with Marcus meant to obtain information? Have you considered the consequences of your actions?" Charlotte kept her head down and hurried toward the waiting taxi, unable to look anyone in the eye. She had once been a respected marketing expert, and now she was at the center of a scandal. When she returned home, she found the locks had been changed. Her key no longer worked. An envelope was taped to the door with her name on it. Inside was a letter from James's lawyer, informing her that James had obtained a temporary restraining order prohibiting her from entering the property, which the court had determined was primarily purchased and maintained by James's income. Charlotte leaned against the door, tears streaming down her face. 18 years of marriage, and now she didn't even have the right to return to her own home. She called Laura. "How bad is it?" she asked directly. "Very bad," Laura answered. "James's lawyer has filed for divorce on grounds of adultery and possible criminal conspiracy. Given the existing evidence and James's current public image, the judge is likely to favor him." "Conspiracy? That's absurd." "Is it?" Laura's voice turned serious. "Charlotte, the Bureau has talked to me. They have records of your text messages with Marcus, where you discussed James's work. They believe you at least unwittingly leaked information." Charlotte felt dizzy. She had indeed sent Marcus some texts about James's work, But that was just to seem knowledgeable, not because she actually knew any important information. She never thought this information would be used to interfere with the investigation. "What should I do?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. "I advise you to cooperate with the investigation," Laura said. "As for the divorce, prepare for the worst. James is now a hero figure, and your public image isn't good." After ending the call, Charlotte stood alone outside what was once her home. She needed to find a place to stay, needed to face the media's judgment, needed to prepare for possible legal charges. And Marcus, the man who made her believe he loved her, had vanished without a trace. Over the next few weeks, Charlotte's life became a nightmare. Clients at her marketing company began terminating contracts, unwilling to be associated with that woman who betrayed her husband. Her friends either avoided her or only contacted her occasionally out of sympathy. On social media, she became a target, labeled as a money-hungry wife and homewrecker. She tried to contact Marcus several times, but received no response. In her mixed feelings of fear and anger, she wasn't sure if she was seeking comfort or venting her rage. How much of their relationship was real? Did he truly care for her, or was she just a tool for obtaining information? Meanwhile, Charlotte had to face an increasingly dire legal situation. James's lawyer provided ample evidence, showing she was not only unfaithful in the marriage, but may have also assisted Marcus in obtaining inside information. Although the Bureau ultimately did not file criminal charges against her, these implications severely damaged her position in the divorce proceedings. On the day of the divorce hearing, the court outside was crowded with media and onlookers. James walked into the court wearing a well-tailored suit, his face calm, while Charlotte chose a simple but professional outfit, trying to convey a serious and respectful attitude. The hearing process was shorter than Charlotte had expected. James's lawyer presented the records of her communications with Marcus, as well as video evidence from home security cameras showing her letting Marcus into their home. What shocked Charlotte even more was that James had kept all her insulting text messages to him after he left home. "When did your marriage start having problems?" the judge asked. "I believe effective communication between us had been lacking for a long time," James calmly replied. "But I never foresaw Charlotte betraying our marriage in this way." When it was Charlotte's turn to speak, she tried to explain her actions. "I felt neglected and unvalued," she said. "James was always working, rarely had time for me. Marcus made me feel appreciated." "So you believe this justifies your infidelity?" James's lawyer interrupted. "No, but it helps understand the context," Charlotte retorted. "I'm not the only one who made mistakes. You are the only one who betrayed the marriage vows," the lawyer pointed out. "You're the only one who allowed a third party into your shared home. You're the only one who disclosed your husband's work information to an outsider." Charlotte couldn't refute these facts. When the judge announced the ruling, she was prepared for an unfavorable outcome, but was still shocked by the actual severity of the judgment. She lost most rights to their joint property, receiving only minimal economic support. James got their house and most of their joint investments. As she left the courtroom, Charlotte found herself walking alongside James. This was the first time they had been so close since that night. "I never thought things would come to this," she said softly, uncertain what reaction she expected. James turned to look at her, his eyes showing neither anger nor triumph, but a calmness she couldn't interpret. "Neither did I. Our 18 years of marriage ended just like this?" "It ended the moment you betrayed me," James replied, his voice low but firm. "Not because of Marcus, but because you chose deception over honesty. What if I had told you then that I felt neglected? Then we might have tried to solve the problem, or realized we were heading in different directions. But at least that would have been honest." Charlotte wanted to say more, to explain her feelings, to defend her actions, but she knew it was pointless. James had made up his mind, and from both legal and moral standpoints, he had the upper hand. "Goodbye, Charlotte," James finally said, then walked toward the car waiting for him. Charlotte stood there, watching his retreating figure, feeling an emptiness she had never experienced before. She had lost not just a husband and a home, but also her self-respect and social standing. And most painful was knowing it was all the result of her own choices. A few days later, news reports stated that Marcus had been arrested and was awaiting trial. He was charged with fraud and obstruction of justice. The report mentioned his extramarital affair with a certain executive's wife, and although Charlotte wasn't named directly, Anyone following the story knew who it was. Charlotte's phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello," she answered cautiously. "Charlotte, it's me." Marcus's voice sounded both tired and tense. "I can't talk long. I'm allowed one phone call." Charlotte felt a wave of complex emotions surge within her. Anger, sadness, confusion, even a hint of care. "Are you okay?" was all she could say. "Not really," Marcus said with a bitter smile. "They caught me. Listen, I want to say I'm sorry. Not for our relationship. That part was real, at least for me. But I did use you to get information, and that was wrong." Charlotte felt tears welling up. "Why didn't you contact me? Why did you run away?" "Because I'm a coward," Marcus admitted. "When everything fell apart, I was only thinking of myself. I'm sorry for getting you involved." "It's too late, Marcus. I've lost everything." "I know," he said softly. "So have I. That's the price of betrayal, I suppose." The call suddenly ended, leaving Charlotte alone with the silent phone in her hand. 1 year later, Charlotte sat in a small cafe, browsing the day's newspaper. Her life had changed dramatically. After losing her high-paying job and social circle, she moved to another city and found work at a small marketing firm. The salary was only half of what she used to earn, but enough to maintain a simple life. She would occasionally see James's name in the news. His company continued to thrive, and he himself had become an advocate for business ethics and corporate responsibility. There were rumors that he had started a new relationship, although he maintained a high level of privacy regarding his personal life. Marcus had been sentenced to 3 years in prison, though he might be released early due to his cooperation with the investigation. Charlotte hadn't contacted him again, nor did she plan to. That relationship, regardless of how much genuine feeling it contained, had been tainted by lies and betrayal. Charlotte took a sip of coffee, contemplating the lessons of the past year. She had never imagined becoming an unfaithful wife, a betrayer, a sinner in society's eyes. She had let herself believe she was a neglected victim, while ignoring her own responsibilities and choices. Her phone rang. It was an email notification from James's lawyer. According to the divorce agreement, the final property division payment had been transferred to her account. This marked the official end of the last connection between them. Just as she was preparing to leave, the cafe's television broadcast a news item. James's company had just announced a major acquisition, making it the undisputed leader in the industry. The camera switched to James being interviewed, looking confident and calm, almost unchanged from his appearance in court a year ago. "What are your plans for the future?" the reporter asked. "Continue to do the right thing," James answered, his voice firm and calm. "Both in business and in personal life." Charlotte knew those words weren't directed at her, but still felt a sting. James was always like that, doing the right thing, regardless of the cost. While she had chosen deception and betrayal, and was now bearing the consequences. As she walked out of the cafe, Charlotte looked up at the sky. The sun was shining, the city bustling. Life continues, though not the life she had once imagined. She had learned a hard lesson about the consequences of choices, about the value of loyalty, about how some mistakes cannot be undone. 5 years later, on a sunny Saturday morning, Charlotte sat on a park bench in downtown Chicago, observing the people around her. She had moved back to this city and worked as a senior consultant at a small marketing firm. The job paid well, but far less than her former income. Over the past few years, she had experienced several brief relationships, but none lasted. She found herself unable to fully trust others, or to fully trust herself. The memory of betraying James and the ensuing consequences always lingered in her subconscious, reminding her of the permanent damage that momentary weakness can cause. Marcus had been released from prison and, as far as she knew, was working at a small media company on the West Coast, away from the spotlight. He had tried to contact her, but she chose not to respond. Some wounds are best left unopened. Charlotte opened her phone and saw a news notification. James's company had just completed a major charitable initiative, donating millions to educational technology projects. In the photo, James was impeccably dressed, with a faint smile, standing next to an elegant dark-haired woman identified as his wife, Emma. Seeing this photo, Charlotte felt a complex mix of emotions. No jealousy, no anger, just a faint regret for what was lost, and a calm acceptance that James had found a new life. Charlotte's phone rang. It was her current boss. "Charlotte, I have good news," he said excitedly. We just won the contract with that big client. The board has agreed to let you lead this project. That's wonderful, Charlotte replied, feeling a hint of professional accomplishment. This wasn't the life she had once imagined, but it had its own value and meaning. We need to start building the team. How does next Monday sound? Perfect, Charlotte said. I'll be ready. After ending the call, Charlotte continued walking in the park. The storm from 5 years ago had passed, and though the scars would never completely disappear, the pain had lessened. She had learned to find lessons in her mistakes, rather than dwelling in self-blame or resentment. As she passed a small outdoor art exhibition, a painting caught her attention. It depicted a forking path, both sides filled with flowers and shadows. It reminded her of her life choices, those that led to light and those that led to darkness. Do you like this painting? A voice came from behind her. Charlotte turned to see a stranger smiling. In the past, she might have been immediately attracted, tempted into another potentially dangerous relationship. But now, she just nodded politely. Yes, it's meaningful, she answered, then continued on her way. She was no longer the Charlotte who sought external validation. She no longer needed others' attention to verify her worth. She had learned to find strength in solitude, completeness in herself. As she reached the park exit, Charlotte happened to see a couple pushing a baby stroller. The man looked down at his wife with a smile, and that intimacy and trust reminded Charlotte of what her marriage with James had been like in the early days, before everything became complicated. She didn't stop to dwell on memories, but continued walking forward. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still in her hands. She had paid the price for her actions, and now it was time to rebuild. As she walked along Chicago's bustling streets, Charlotte was no longer that cheating wife, but just one of many people facing life's challenges. Her story was about betrayal and consequences, but also about accepting responsibility and seeking redemption. Not through forgiveness from others. James had never given it, and she no longer expected it, but through her own understanding and growth. This is the ultimate lesson for the betrayer. Some broken things can never be repaired, but we can still build something new from the fragments. Not far away, on a towering office building, the Truth Security Group logo gleamed in the sunlight. Charlotte didn't know if James was there, didn't know what would happen if they accidentally met. But she knew that whatever happened, she was ready to face her past, with all its regrets and lessons, and continue toward the future. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more wonderful content. We look forward to seeing you in our next story.